Good day and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. So on the map we have the capital of the former state of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. The headquarters of the Prosperity Party and the regime of Abiy Ahmed resides in the city-state of Addis Ababa, also known as Fenfene. Now the question in this video that I'm going to ask is Ethiopia, the former state of Ethiopia, in a better position now than it was prior to the ascension of the throne of Abiy Ahmed? Mr. Abiy Ahmed, when coming into office, immediately proceeded to enter into negotiations with the state of Eritrea and Isaias Afwerki. Eritrea is one of the most despotic regimes on the planet. One could argue that it could be as despotic as the regime in North Korea. We could argue that. The Prosperity Party and Abiy Ahmed proceeded to enter into agreements in which the town of Badme, I believe it was per the Algier agreements, was to be handed back over to the regime and the state of Eritrea. So there was a significant amount of effort by Abiy Ahmed and the Prosperity Party to placate the regime inside of Eritrea, and that was done. And because of that, Mr. Ahmed won the Nobel Peace Prize. Was the same effort, the same desire, the same initiative that was utilized to placate the regime, the despotic regime, inside of Eritrea, was that also used in its relationship within its own country, meaning the internals of Ethiopia? And I mean the relationship between the federal government, the Prosperity Party, Abiy Ahmed, and the TPLF, the Tigray region. Did we see the same sort of negotiation process in terms of trying to resolve differences that was seen in dealing with an external despotic regime than dealing with its own people? Now, again, that's a question for the people of the former state of Ethiopia to decide. I imagine the answer would be no. The same type of effort was not expended towards interacting with one of its own regions than it was an external state actor such as Eritrea. So the handover complete, the negotiations were done with Eritrea. The Nobel Peace Prize was handed out, and not long after that occurs, we basically see the buildup of forces between the state of Eritrea and the federal forces backed by the Amhara region, which plunged the nation into quite possibly one of the bloodiest civil wars we will now currently see inside of sub-Saharan Africa. That is a fact. The country formerly known as Ethiopia is in a state of complete and utter civil conflict, not just in the Tigray region, but other regions as well have been plunged into civil conflict. One would argue that inside of the Oromia region, there exists a civil war within a civil war. Obviously, the Tigray region is at the forefront of what is occurring, but there is tremendous amount of bloodshed in other parts of the country as well. Now, one would argue that that state may have existed inside of Ethiopia prior to the ascension of Abiy Ahmed, but I would say that, and a lot of persons would say this as well, that all this has been exacerbated by the current regime of the Prosperity Party and Abiy Ahmed. But prior to 2018, Ethiopia was not in a state of high intensity civil war and high intensity insurgency. It was not having Eritrea deploy thousands of troops inside of Ethiopia. If we were to look back and look at 2018 prior to the ascension of Abiy Ahmed and the Prosperity Party, and we could look into the future and we could say in 2021 thousands of Eritrean troops would be inside of Ethiopia. The democratic processes would be eroded. Civil war would be taking place all across Ethiopia. Would Abiy Ahmed have then been brought into power? And I would argue probably not. But whether whomever likes it or does not like it, that is the current situation inside of Ethiopia. The state of Ethiopia is rapidly dissolving. And it is doing so because of the decision-making processes of Abiy Ahmed. The conflict that is now taking place inside of the Tigray region did not have to occur. It was avoidable. But the same efforts, the same processes that went into placating an external threat, an external dictatorship in Isaias Afwerki and Eritrea, the same effort did not go into dealing with the Tigray region. It was a plan for an almost inevitable march towards civil war that occurred and now occurs and is going to continue and could probably well get very, very worse. Now, again, back to the original question that I asked in terms of like question of performance. Would you now like Abiy Ahmed to be your leader if you knew, if you could see into the future in terms of what was going to happen in 2021 back in 2018? And I would say probably a lot of people who identify themselves as Ethiopian would say no. And I would say also that as this continues to get worse, and it will get worse, without a doubt, outside of a rapid collapse of the existing government and leadership changes within the federal government, but even then, I'm not even sure that would save the former state of Ethiopia because of the horror equation. And I believe that that equation is also going to come bear its ugly head at some point, which it already really has. But again, just back to that main issue, if Ethiopia knew what Ethiopia would look like now, would Abiy Ahmed have ever been brought into power? And I would argue quite possibly not. And just back to that question of performance, is Ethiopia in a better place now than it was in 2017? Only the people inside of the former state of Ethiopia can really answer that question. But at this point in time, the situation looks incredibly dire as a nation state, and I'll talk about where things are probably heading, and I've already done that in a previous video. But what does it look like in 5 years from now? What does it look like 10 years from now? I would say the prognosis does not look good. Have a great day, everybody.